Welcome to the weekly duck migration forecast for the end of November and the beginning of December. I hope everybody had a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving with family. It looked like a bunch of you had some downtime. I got some really good questions from the audience this week. So remember, you can email me your questions about duck migration and waterfowl ecology and conservation in general at weeklyduckmigrationforecast@gmail.com. Send me your name and general location. Clark, I do appreciate this. I got a fair number of these from folks. Clark said he just really appreciated that I'm putting this together each week. And it was a missing piece of info year after year for him, so he's glad he stumbled across the channel. So please share this with other folks. I really do enjoy doing this and reaching out to the waterfowling community and those that really like to talk about duck migration in general. But Clark went on to ask, it seems like we've had colder October, Novembers these past few years, followed by much warmer December and early January in the East and Midwest. Is there any correlation as far as warm or cold spells running their course early versus late? I actually reached out, I've seen this as well. I actually reached out to some of my climatologist colleagues that I work with. And a lot of those folks work on long term forecasts into late winter. I am going to dig more on this one. I think this is a fantastic question because I've seen it as well. And this year we got that nice cold front early in October in the upper Midwest and the Dakotas. And then that kind of faded. And I'll show you some graphs here in a bit of how we've really warmed up. So this does, at least in my mind, seem to be a trend. But what this has to do with, again, my colleagues that are climatologists that I work with really didn't want to stick their neck out and say what was running this. Most of what they work on are January, February, March, kind of the depth of winter type forecasts that affect a large portion of folks from the Mississippi River kind of east in general. So Clark, I'll work on your question as time goes on and hopefully come back to this one. VR. That's all I got was initials. So VR of Jonesboro, Arkansas, great part of the world. Says, I normally look at your Memphis section for the graphs, but how does Northeast Arkansas look for the rest of the season? Any thoughts? If you go back to episode 1 and then my bonus episode, I kind of talk about a warm year in general. I still think that is what we have coming. I think December is going to be above normal temperatures with limited snow cover. I'm kind of hoping for some stuff in January for folks. But I think, keeping track of this forecast this year is going to be more important than some years where birds show up early. But one of the things I want to talk about here for Northeast Arkansas is this. Some colleagues of mine at the University of Arkansas looked at the density of mallard band recoveries in the Mississippi and Central Flyways, September to February hunting seasons over 3 periods. And you can see those at the bottom, 1980 to 1997, 98 to 2000, and 2001 to 2003. Now, this is a bit dated and people are working on this. But the point is, if you look at that dark area, that's where mallards get shot. Northeast Arkansas is and continues to be a duck shooting mecca. Some of that, if you look at how the coloration goes, there are increasing recoveries elsewhere. It has shifted a little bit to other areas, but at some point in the season, mallards just get to Northeast Arkansas. It is an ancestral area for them. The Arkansas has done a very good job of maintaining big timber, and the Corps of Engineers has not screwed up their flood regime too much in general. They held that off more than other locations, and that's helped them preserve some really high quality shooting in Northeast Arkansas. Now, the question is on the timing of that. A lot of what happens, I think, is that, yes, these birds get to those areas, but sometimes they might not get there to the second week of January. And I think that's just problematic for the amount of time folks can go hunting and the economic, the dollars that are just pumped into these rural communities. If you have ducks from December through January, then this really helps the local rural economies. And I think people do hunt more when the ducks are there. It's not like deer hunters that just go out and hope they see a deer. You generally know that ducks are in, and then you go. So as the numbers of ducks decline, or the timing of when they show up is later, it seems that duck hunters just tend to go a little bit less. But the point is that Northeast Arkansas continues to shoot the lion's share of mallards in general. So PR, I think you just keep an eye on this forecast and go when it looks like it's going to get hot. And for that matter, if you want to just go with family and such, it's still nice to get out in the blind no matter what. Although it is obviously nice to have good numbers of ducks when you're out. So great question, appreciate it. Hopefully that helped with a little bit of science behind it. Ed from Bridgeville, Delaware. Again, as I said, folks had time off for Thanksgiving, so they asked a bunch of good questions this week. Ed from Bridgeville, Delaware asks, has climate change afforded ducks opportunity to head back to their breeding grounds earlier than 20 plus years ago? Great question, right? Something we don't talk about. As duck hunters, we're really interested in the fall flight and the timing of when they get south, but are they actually heading back to the breeding grounds earlier? I've actually have some data on this. If we look at the weather severity index, I'll give you an example for black ducks right now. We looked at the weather severity index from 1980 till 2013 in some data a few years back, and this is for the Mississippi and Atlantic Flyway. And so this is the area in the Mississippi and Atlantic Flyway where the weather severity index is beyond the threshold, or in areas where you wouldn't expect ducks to be able to stay. And what you find is that the amount of area in the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways where the threshold is great enough where the birds can't be there has actually declined through time. And this is an example for the American black duck. But look, there's a lot of variation. But the trend line says that from February to April, in that period, that on an annual basis, that the amount of area, right, where they can't stay has decreased by 2,620 square kilometers. Or said another way is there's 2,620 square kilometers now available per year that was not previously available. If we look at this across species, mallards, black ducks, gadwall, widgeon, green-winged teal, and northern shoveler have a lot more area where that threshold is not great enough, where they have to be south of that. If we just pick out the American black duck, for instance, and we expand that across the 33 years of this study, that turns into 86,460 square kilometers of area where the weather severity index is not great enough that they can't be there. So that's additional area that's available to them where weather is not precluding them from using it. To put that in context, that is an area about I'd say a little larger than the state of South Carolina. So that is habitat that's stacked up at mid latitudes where ducks through February through April can be using where they couldn't previously. So that suggests that yes, actually birds may be moving back to the breeding grounds earlier than 20 years ago. I would say in central New York, we have a shorter and shorter period of time during winter with hard freeze where we don't have ducks around the Finger Lakes and central New York region. So great questions this week, really appreciate it. Next week, I was going to cover this week, but we got a bunch of good questions, so I handled those. Next week, I want to cover this topic that has been in the news talking about warm Arctic cold continents. And this is actually something that's going to be really of interest to duck hunters because in a warming climate, we actually have a feedback loop that seems to be pushing some cold or causing polar vortex disruptions and pushing some cold down the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways. That is moderating the general effects of a warming planet. So despite that the planet's getting really warm, we're still getting some cold fronts at this time. And I'll explain how that works next week, put it in lay terms to the best of my ability. So please tune in for that one next week. I'll hold off on people's questions probably next week and try to cover this at the front end. All right, so I've been talking about it being a milder year. I want to put this in context. If we look on the left, that's our snow cover. As of today, 2020, and 2019 looked quite a bit different. In fact, um, it looks like, you know, Iowa's peak in duck migration, specifically from mallards to a large degree, has happened about a week later this year. They're just starting to peak or have just peaked. In Missouri's mallard numbers are about 25% below where the 5-year average is. If you're interested in these snow maps and want to look more at them, the web page is in the middle right there, and you can copy that. And what you can do is you can click on, the United States or certain areas, and you can click on and you can get a map of a 2-week snow cover loop, and it shows you the snow cover through time in 2-week periods, and you can compare those for your area between 2020 and 2019 if you like. Really nice resource, and it's definitely something that I use to help me with this forecast. So I'd like to hand folks those types of tools that are out there on the internet to help them with their hunting and determining what dates they'd like to go. Given that snow cover, that also comes with temperature. So I'd like to give a little feel for the difference in years right now because it is pretty substantial. And if people feel like they're not seeing the ducks they want, it has a lot to do with weather this year. So this is the Mallard Weather Severity Index with a 5-day moving average trend line for Devils like North Dakota. With 2019 is the dark dots, 2020 is the open dots. The dotted line is the weather severity threshold where we would expect to see a declining number of mallards at that location between any 2 days. So if we look at 2020, right, this was that one cold front that hit us early. But look at those dots since then. We haven't seen much. So did that cold front that came into the Dakotas really move ducks south early? Yes, it did, but we've gotten very mild since then. We compare this to 2019, boy, look at the difference in those weather severity indices, those black dots from last year to the white dots this year. That the North Dakota region basically has Canada geese and mallards left, but the fact that they even have mallards left at this point is generally relatively surprising, and that they're even there. So mallard migration has definitely been delayed in the Mississippi Flyway because of this relatively mild weather that we've had. And if we look at, this is December 6th right now, we've got a big disparity between 2019 and 2020, which is the last date. That's next Sunday, or this Sunday coming up. If we look at Ottawa, Ontario, the situation is even worse in the Atlantic Flyway. In 2020, right, that's the best we've gotten, and we barely have weather that has caused mallards to move. If we look at 2019, we would have had some pretty substantial movement of mallards into our area. My wife and I hunted on Saturday, and on the opener of our second split in central New York, we got our mallards without a problem. There's still plenty of mallards around. We probably could have shot 10 limits. At the two mallard limit is a little frustrating when you can shoot plenty. There's lots of mallards kicking around. But we also shot one pintail each, but we only got one black duck. And one black duck at this time of year is pretty surprising for us. We should basically not have pintails anymore. We should be easily shooting our 2 mallards, which we did, but we should be able to pick up more than one black duck. I think we might have seen 2 black ducks all morning, and that's a testament to where the weather's at right now. Just a generally mild year in the Atlantic Flyway at this point. Very strongly mild year. All right, so that's a lot of details. The summary for this week, I'd still say little to no mallard and black duck migration. That continues to be a theme. I do expect, so there is some weather. I mean, it's not all grim. I do expect a push of dabbling ducks other than mallards and black ducks in the Mississippi Flyway. Pintails early in the week into places south of Memphis, Tennessee, as well as gadwall, shoveler, widgeon, and green-winged teal late in the week. So I expect there to be some moving around. I expect the, kind of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi complex there, those 3 high-quality waterfowling states, to pick up some of these birds. So I'd be ready by the weekend for a new bunch of birds. I'd get out. I think there's going to be some good shooting to be had. Things are cooling down the Atlantic Flyway as well. which should finally move some pintail, shoveler, widgeon, and green-winged teal into I'd even say the South Carolina latitude this week. Hopefully that holds up. That the cold front they're talking about for later in the week, we're getting at least a reasonable cool down. But we got dry conditions that are increasing in some areas of the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways, along with the relatively mild weather I've been talking about. It's really making duck hunting difficult for many. And these aren't even really stale ducks. I mean, stale ducks are ones that show up and then get shot at a little bit, and they're then they're tough to decoy and such. This is just that A, ducks aren't there right from the get go, and B, that the weather's just too mild for them to even really move around much, and so they're just sticking to kind of known locations and coasting for now. So hopefully we get a little bit more cool weather in the near future to help us out as the season goes on. So we'll go through the tables here real quick. I'm going to jump right past the Mallard and Blackduck one because it pretty much says the same thing. We're just not seeing the blue, which is what's needed for us to have a good push of these birds from pretty much anywhere at this point. Pintails, however, again, if we go, let's just go to the East Coast all the way to the right. That's the first blue that's shown up. So we got a little bit of a bump there. We might get some movement of pintails in the east, and we do as we kind of go back to the west towards the west, and a little bit north, we get a lot more action as far as those blue colors moving pintails all week at the latitude of Columbus, Ohio. We get a really good shot. And even as far south, right, as Memphis, Tennessee, we at least crossed that threshold that would cause pintails to migrate. So I'd look for some pintail movement this week for sure, more so in the Mississippi than the Atlantic Flyway. But I think at least we're getting something going on, starting to go on in the Atlantic Flyway at the mid-latitude and potentially into southern latitudes. For Gadwall, real good movement in the Mississippi Flyway, and we still have some around in central New York. Again, most of them have moved on, and so they're hanging at that mid latitude, Pennsylvania, Washington D.C.-ish, Chesapeake, and so I don't expect a lot of movement of those birds, but we might see some small movement of birds that are remaining at northern latitude. So most of this action, as far as movement, is going to be in the Mississippi Flyway this week for Gadwall. Similar for shoveler, except in the Atlantic Flyway, we get a little, again, I'm thinking we're going to get a bump of birds way late in the week, potentially moving south and picking up some birds, even south of North Carolina. But I'd expect this is really good to see Memphis, Tennessee starting to show up in blue. We've got a bit of movement out of there. So I think folks, Mississippi again, Arkansas, Louisiana are going to pick birds up. And one that folks are more interested in, widgeon and green-winged teal, which are most sensitive. I think that's going to be your biggest movement this week, and that you can really expect to pick up some fresh and naive birds for shooting in the widgeon green-winged teal category, and especially on the East Coast. If I was in South Carolina, I'd be putting rigs of widgeon and green-winged teal decoys out to pick up some birds and hopefully get some good shooting this week. River gauges, it's not looking great. If we look on the left over here of this week, this is just today's. I mean, there's a real wet area, but then there's this swath of pretty dry stuff that continues, and it's been giving people problems, right? It's surprising. We need water. We had a lot of it. It seems to be gone. There's a lot of river management and flood management that occurs, and I think that water was dumped out pretty quick that we got earlier from all that hurricane action, and so things have started to shape up, really dry in general in that area, and with mild weather and dry, that's going to be tough for duck hunting in general. I tend to like an area where it got a lot of water and a lot of mobility to just seek out, find ducks, and have some good shoots. So I think that we really should be hoping for some rain to work through that area. I know we're getting some today. In our area, we're getting about an inch. We need about 6 inches of rain actually right now in central New York. We're as dry in that whole area as it gets, and it's been real tough for us to even hold birds around. All right, so that's my migration forecast for this week. I want to note this: that we got 251 subscribers to the YouTube channel right now, but we've got about a little over 1,500 views, and we have 729 unique viewers. So To help me out a bit, it really does help to have subscribers. I put a lot of time and effort into this work. So if you get a chance, just click the little subscribe button down there on the lower right. Helps me out a bit and keeps those numbers bumped up and keeps me motivated to keep bringing this to you. Please do feel free to send your questions to weeklyduckmigrationforecast@gmail.com. And again, I'm doing these till the end of January, end of duck season for everybody. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Have a safe week. Shoot straight, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.